Let's start by taking a look at how we can bring in some simple geometry. Then we'll take a look at how we can start to modify that geometry. So to begin with, I'm going to go ahead and just maximize the perspective view. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that viewport and hit Alt-W to maximize that. Let's go ahead and move in to see our grid here. Now, where we're going to be able to create our geometry from is going to be that command panel that we talked about earlier, and specifically the create panel within that command panel. So it's going to be the first tab here on the left. You can see if I hover over it, it says create. Now, as we move from top to bottom, you'll be able to kind of figure out what you want to actually create. So right here at the top, you can see from left to right, you can create geometry, shapes, lights, and so forth. And if you click on that, everything underneath changes. So we want to create geometry because we're going to be building a model. Underneath that, you can see there's a menu here that lets you decide what kind of geometry you want to create. Primitive objects are going to be basic objects that will allow you to have sort of a starting point. So think of like a sphere, a cube, a cone, things like that. And so if we just choose standard primitives, you'll get a selection of primitives that you can create. So let's say that we want to create a basic box. We'll click on box, and then our creation method is located right underneath. Without changing anything, you could go in and create it manually. So to do that, you could click and drag, and I'm just holding down the left mouse button and dragging, and that's creating basically the bottom of the cube, or top, depending on which way you drag. So I'm still holding down that left mouse button. I'm going to release it at a certain point, and now I'm just going to move the mouse. And if I move it up, you can see it's adding height, and you can see those values change if you look over to the right as I move this up and down. Down towards the bottom of the screen under parameters, you can see that height changing after we've already set the length and width. I can also go down if I want to do that, negative amount. And so whenever I get the box the way that I want, I can go ahead and just click again, and there's my box. Now there are other ways to create a box as well. So let's actually create a different kind of primitive. Let's choose a cylinder. Now in this case, we could come in and say, well, I don't want to draw out my cylinder. I want to actually just type in the values that I want it to have and then put it in place. And so we can come under keyboard entry. Let's make it 20 centimeters, and let's for the radius, and then for the height, let's set this to 100 centimeters, and we'll go ahead and create. And you can see that that cylinder has been created. Now it's inside of the cube. So all I'm going to do is go ahead and hit Q. I'm going to select the box, hit W, and I'm going to move this out of the way. So W is going to bring up our move tool. And you can see here is our cylinder. And the advantage of doing it this way is this is right on the origin. Okay. And so you can see it right in the middle there. It's placed perfectly. Now, whenever you've created an object, you can always go back in and modify it. Now to do that, we want to go to the modify panel. So next to create, once we've created it, we're going to go to the next panel. This is still a primitive. Both of these are still in a primitive state. If we go to modify, you can see this is listed as a cylinder. This is listed as a box. When you see that, that means that to do any sort of changes to the shape, you're going to want to do those in the modify panel. You can't just grab points and start moving them around because this is still in a specific parameterized state. So let's choose the cylinder, and we're in the modify panel. We can go in and we can interactively change the radius. We can change the height, and I'm just clicking and dragging on these spinners. We can also change the height segments, so we can add more resolution or less. Change the cap segments up at the top. Or we can change the number of sides, so we can make it smoother or less so. And that all happens inside of our modify panel. Now, once we're ready to do a little bit more intense modeling on this, we need to convert this from a primitive into an editable polygon. And so to do that, we're going to right click and come down to convert to, and we're just going to convert to an editable poly. So you've got editable mesh and editable poly. A lot of the tools that you want to use will apply to a poly, but some won't apply to mesh. So normally we'll go with the editable poly. So we'll do that. And you can see now this is modified and changed in the modify panel into an editable poly. And now there's a little spinner that you can drop down. So if we roll this down, you can see now I can go in and there's a vertex selection, edge, border, polygon, element. These are sub-objects. And this is what's going to allow us to actually change the shape and get away from the cylindrical shape. So as a primitive, we're able to change the radius and the amount of divisions around the side, the height of it. But if we wanted to do any sort of complicated modeling, we couldn't do that because we couldn't access the sub-objects, but now we can. So to do this, we can go in, and you can see as we select vertex, these blue dots appear. We can go ahead and select those, and I can move those around. We can also, on our keyboard, hit the number key. So hitting the 1 key will take you to vertex selection. You can see it remembers our selection. If we hit the 2 key, that'll bring us to an edge selection, and we can go in and select some edges if we want to. If we hit the 3 key, that's going to go to border. The 4 key is going to let us choose the actual polygons. And with any of these, if you want to add to your selection, you're just going to use Control and Shift to add either loops or just groupings. Okay, you can also use these buttons down here to toggle. So I can go to vertex, edge, border. You can see how they correspond. Whenever you have something selected, if you look down below, you're going to see lots of different settings that you're going to be able to choose with that. And we're not going to go through a lot of those because we're just kind of scratching the surface. But to select those sub-objects, you want to go in with those number keys. And then when you're ready to go back to your object, you can come in and go ahead and select your editable poly and move it around again. Now this modifier stack here, that we can actually put things on top of our object. And it's a very kind of flexible way to work. So let's say we wanted to smooth this out. We could come into our modifier list, and there's a bunch of different options that we can choose. Let's go ahead and come down to Turbo Smooth. And you can see this is on top, so this is actually affecting the geometry underneath. You can see how this is smoothed out. With that Turbo Smooth selected, I could increase the number of iterations, and that would make that smoother. If I select the editable poly, I'm not seeing that Turbo Smooth because I'm just seeing this particular level. If we come down here and turn on Show End Result, it'll show whatever the top of that stack is doing to it. So in this case, we're seeing the result of that Turbo Smooth even though we're on the lowest level. If we want to turn off that Turbo Smooth, we can just hit the little eye icon. We can also trash it and be done with it. And you can add lots of different things on here to create the final effect that you want to have. Now let's take a look at how we can use some of 3ds Max's modeling tools to actually modify our geometry a little bit more. And again, this is M102. So if you want to open up that project file, there's actually some geometry already in here that we can use. You can see it listed over here in our Scene Explorer, but to actually turn this on, let's go ahead and first I'm just going to get rid of these pieces that we added. Then I'm going to go into the Layer Explorer up here at the top. Go ahead and click on that. I'm just going to turn on the ship layer. And here you can see our ship that we're going to be using. Let's say that we want to add a little bit of kind of an inset to the front of this piece. So we can select that geometry, and you can see it's an editable poly. You can see it expanded here, and then there's this open subdiv modifier right above it. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. So let's access our editable poly, and we want to go to the sub-object that we want to access and change. So let's go to Polygon. Then we can select the polygons that we want to use, and I'm just going to control click on these so we get these polygons up front here. And then I'm going to expand the Graphite Modeling Tools ribbon up here at the top. Let's go ahead and click on this little arrow. That's going to expand our ribbon here, and we're going to have a bunch of sections, and these are going to be relevant to whatever sub-object we happen to have selected. So in this case, we have polygons selected, so all of these tools are going to be relevant to the polygons. And so what we want to do is I want to first kind of shrink this down and make kind of a hole that we can push in. To do that, we're going to use a tool called Inset. So a lot of these tools that you can find up here, you'll also be able to find in your Modify panel. If you come down here, kind of scroll down. We're kind of short on space here, but if you scroll down under Edit Geometry, you'll see there's a bunch of different tools here that you can use. So you can access some of these as you move down here, or you can access them from your ribbon up here. And so I want to do an inset. I'm going to choose the little arrow next to inset and go to Inset Settings. That's going to allow me to come in and change things on the fly. So I can come in and choose the amount of inset, and that kind of gives you an idea. So this is 0. So what we're doing is we're extruding and kind of scaling down. So I've set this to about 6 centimeters. If we come in here and change by polygon, we can do the same thing to each polygon individually, or we can treat this as a group, which is what we want to do. If you want to do another one, you can go ahead and hit the plus sign. Like if you want to do it in sequence, do one after the other. If you just want to go ahead and commit it, you can hit the little check mark, or if you want to get out of this without doing the inset, you can hit the X. So let's go ahead and hit the check mark. So now we've created our inset. We want to do an extrude, which is going to push the polygons in or out. Let's go back to polygons. And again, we'll choose the little arrows and go to extrude settings. And here we can choose our value. So by choosing a negative amount, we're pushing into the ship body. By choosing a positive amount, we're pulling it out. And so we want to actually make an inset vent. And so let's go ahead and push this in, and let's commit that. Okay, so lots of different tools that are available. Extrude, honestly, is a tool that you're going to use a whole lot if you do modeling. It's going to be really, really useful for you. So let's go in now and access our editable poly. And a lot of times you'll want to actually work on a low resolution piece and then smooth it later on. That's a very common way of working. And to do that in 3ds Max, there's several different ways you can. I've gone ahead and just added from the modifiers list. If we come down here, there's an open subdiv modifier. I've just gone ahead and added that. That is going to smooth out our geometry. And you can see this is very, very smooth up at the front, almost to the point of not really being mechanical anymore. It's a little bit too organic. So what you want to do is sharpen up those edges that you don't want to be smooth. Now, there are different ways that we can do this, but I want to show you how to actually add real edges in order to do this. So remember what this looks like here, how smooth this is. And then I'm going to go ahead, click back on editable poly, and I don't have the show in result turned on, so I'm just looking at the low resolution. This is what it looks like smoothed. This is the low res version. Now I want to come in and add some edges to this. So if I choose Swift Loop, you can see I didn't even have to go into the sub-object level. I can come in and you can see the green highlight is giving me, I'm not pushing any buttons, but it's giving me kind of a preview of where that edge is going to be added. So let's come in and add an edge right along the inside there. I just clicked with the left mouse button. Let's see what that did. So if I go ahead and select, you can see that's actually sharpened up this edge right here. To do that even more, we can come in and add another edge. So we'll go to Swift Loop again, add one right there. So we've just now made 3 edges going around that corner. If we go ahead and choose Open Subdiv, you can see that now that's much sharper of an edge. You can see how this is really, really soft in here, and this is really sharp. That's because it's smoothing between these 3 edges which are far apart and these 3 edges which are very close. So you get sharp versus smooth. So it's that interplay between those that are really going to make your models pop. And 3ds Max provides a lot of different tools for you to be able to do that. So that's a quick look at geometry and kind of working with primitives and also using some simple modeling tools in 3ds Max. There's a ton more tools that you can utilize, and it's really a powerful modeling application. In the next clip, Josh is going to take you through the basics of animation. So setting keyframes and moving your objects around the scenes.